Well, welcome into another episode of the Story World. It's Steve and my boy Al. What's up, man?
Not too much, just another day in the life of living in your boy Al's shoes.
The most fascinating experience. Well, if they made a documentary about you, I bet you'd be a hit.
You'd be amazed. I've already made a documentary about myself, so I plan on releasing it to the public at some point soon.
Speaking of a hit, man, how excited are you about Oppenheimer?
Whew, I cannot wait. Yeah, it comes out in, I think, exactly a month or a little bit less than a month.
Yeah, I think it's like the 20th or something. Yeah, I'm really excited. I saw a commercial for it while I was watching the last fight, and man, I'm just pumped. It's going to be so awesome.
I think we plan on hitting the IMAX for that, don't we?
Yeah, man. I'm excited. It's going to be so good.
Intense. Yes, looking forward to that. It'll be good.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, we're diving into a subject today that I'm very excited about. I know Alex is excited about it. We're going to be talking about parables, specifically the parables of Jesus, the parables in the Bible. And I think those have some incredible lessons for us to learn today. Not only that, they're just like the prime example of fantastic, timeless storytelling. And that's what we love to talk about here. So I think we're going to have a good time with this one, don't you?
It's yeah, I'm really excited about it from a lot of different aspects. I think just kind of an interesting topic that we're going through with it is that it's a story within a story. You know, the Bible itself is just a story and everything that happens in it. But then when you also have Jesus, you know, telling his own stories and his own parables, it kind of adds that extra layer to it. So not only can you diagnose what he's saying, but you can also diagnose what's going on at that time and why he's saying what he's saying. So there's just a lot of aspects we'll cover, but yeah, I'm excited for it.
Yeah, and parables are really interesting. They actually, you wouldn't think so, but they come along with a fair amount of controversy because there are, for example, some people, there's a really common notion that parables are told for the purpose of simplification. In fact, when Jesus is asked about that, it's the exact opposite. And we're going to get into that, but he actually answers his disciples a lot of times with actually, like, and I'm just paraphrasing and saying this a little bit more colloquially, but it's kind of like, actually, I told it this way because like some people are going to get it and it's actually going to confuse the people that aren't meant to get it. And it's like, what does that mean?
Yeah, it's kind of wild.
We're going to talk about that. Yeah, it is wild.
Especially when you hear people, you hear people say a lot, oh, we spoke in parables, to make it simple for everyone to understand.
Yeah.
It's just the total opposite, at least in a few cases.
Yeah, and like what's interesting is that it, in a sense, it was simpler for them to understand because the stories were relatable to that culture. But just because it's relatable doesn't mean it's something that you resonate with spiritually. And so it's not, even though the story is relatable, it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to make sense. And they're also controversial because there are some stories in the Bible that some people think are parables and some people think they're not parables. And strangely enough, some people get really passionate about that. Like it really matters. Like whether or not, you know, some of these stories were true. But even for the people that get passionate about that, it's not like they don't think that the ones that they're for sure that are parables, like they have no problem with that. So anyway,
in the end,
really interesting stuff.
Whether a parable is true or not, too, in the end, it's still a story meant to convey a meaning.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, that's a good segue. So, why parables? Why are we talking about parables? Let's first talk about what a parable is. How do you define the term parable?
I know how you're going to define it, so I'll try to tiptoe my way around it. I would define a parable is I'm not going to say this very I guess I haven't very tight with my words, but a parable, looking at it from the perspective of Jesus talking through parables, is a means of communicating something spiritual. I would say something spiritual, but using it in relative terms and relatable ways that the masses or everyone can understand because it relates to human experience around us, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The way that I always heard it growing up, and I think this is just as good of a definition as any, is that it's an earthly story that has a heavenly meaning. And this is another one that's interesting because in a lot of these parables, you find people asking Jesus to clarify what he means, and then just a few verses down, he normally does. So in most of these parables, you don't have to wonder what he's actually getting at. He explains the meaning of it. And a lot of times how this happens is the parable is told in a way that everybody can hear. And then later on, the disciples will sort of have Jesus to themselves again, and they'll be like, okay, what did that mean? And that's when Jesus tends to go in and sort of explain, well, here's what these parables actually meant. So it's an earthly story with a heavenly meaning, but it's not as though we have to guess what the meaning is. In many cases, Jesus tells us exactly what the meaning is. And nevertheless, as the Bible says, those who have ears to hear, let them hear. So I want to kind of go to you on this next point a little bit and just like, what is the importance of parables in storytelling and teaching lessons? I mean, do you think that, like, do you agree with the fact that the parable is a good way to get an idea across? Do you think that this is a genre that more people should use more often? Or I don't know, just what are your thoughts as it relates to storytelling?
Yeah, the one thing that I think is super applicable, just not talking about a specific parable or the spiritual lessons behind it, but just the formatting of it, very applicable to today. I think about, especially again, our relationships, whether it's at work or for your spouse. A lot of times we tend to talk past each other, or have a difficult time understanding each other, or maybe understanding where the other person's coming from. But if you can take the time and space and really think about a way to share how you're feeling or a thought you have relatable to the other person. So say if you enjoy reading, but your spouse enjoys sports, and you're trying to have a discussion about something, you're frustrated about something and it's not working, come up with some type of story as it relates to sports and have the person really relate to that. And then at the end, kind of what Jesus did a lot, at the end say, okay, well, how that applies to sports is exactly what's happening to me in this situation. And that kind of follows at least the formatting of a parable where Jesus will tell a story and you think, how the heck does that relate to anything that either the disciples will ask, the people ask, or he'll explain himself. And then you see the linkage there. So I definitely think that, if not, exactly like it, definitely the principle of it and how it's presented can definitely be applied to what we use it for today.
Percent. And like the best way that I can describe this is that a parable makes the process of illustrating a concept a lot simpler. And one of my marketing heroes, Russell Brunson, he talks about the idea of having an attractive character. So when you're doing marketing, you have an attractive character, and the attractive character is somebody that has, and the attractive character is not like, it's not making something up. It's more so thinking about intentionally how you plan to show up when you're doing your marketing. And so, for example, an attractive character is going to have like 4 main elements: a backstory, parables, polarity, and then there's another one, and it's slipping my mind. But so basically, a attractive character is going to be controversial. They're going to have stories that can relate the ideas that they want to teach to other people. They're going to have an actual backstory themselves. And so, like, being able to utilize parables to illustrate a concept is so powerful. For example, let's say that, because this is an exact example that would come from Russell. He has this close that he likes to do in his sales presentations where he talks about the concept of investment. And so what he wants people to understand is the concept that they're getting ready to spend money with him, and that money is not a cost. It's an investment in the future. But he doesn't just say that, right? He doesn't just say it's an investment. Believe me. What does he do? He tells a parable, because the parable illustrates the concept in a way that gives you the aha moment. It's like, I get this. And so briefly, the parable that he tells to illustrate that particular concept is about this time when he was learning wrestling and he was working with his wrestling coach. And he comes, his coach comes over and gives him like all these DVDs of specific matches that he needs to watch in order to learn how to do the thing. And before he leaves, he says, "Give me your wallet." And Russell's like, "What? What are you talking about?" He's like, "Your wallet. I need your wallet." So he's like, "Okay." And so he has his wallet, and I don't know how much it was, but he literally takes all the cash out of his wallet, folds the wallet back up, and hands it back to him. It's like, "Okay, thanks. See ya." And he's like, "Wait, what just happened? Why did you just take all of my money?" And he's like, "Because if I just gave it to you for free, you wouldn't take it seriously. But now you're invested. And so I know you're going to take it seriously and you're actually going to follow through and take these lessons to heart." And so that story is meant to illustrate the concept of, oh, if I invest in this thing, I'm actually going to care about it. And it doesn't matter what it costs, because if I get the result, then it was worth every penny. And so that's one example of how it crosses the bridge into my world of marketing. But this is really helpful for me to even talk about out loud, because I'm actually really bad, in my opinion, at coming up with illustrations off the top of my head, or even thinking about them, like even when preaching sermons and stuff like that. Whereas if I thought more in terms of parables from true experiences that I've had in my life, I think I could almost come up with that a lot easier than some random illustration. So it's kind of a neat concept if you think about it.
Yeah, absolutely. And it can be applied, like what you said, you applied it to in a strategic way. I applied it to a little, like, in a personal way. It can be applied in any way. And even as like a mind exercise, if you're writing a blog post or an area of fiction, if you just want to try to think about what type of content am I writing, you can naturally go into, well, what parable would kind of fit this description, or what type of like small lesson or story could this link up, just to kind of as a thought exercise on what type of content you're preparing.
Yeah, and there's a really interesting framework. I'm glad you brought that up. There's a really interesting framework. Once again, it's kind of it's a Russell Brunson framework. What can I say? He's a smart guy. Where it's actually his framework for teaching frameworks, and it always starts with a story about how you learned or earned it, right? Rather than just getting into the strategy or the tactics, because that gets people invested. And so I'd venture to say that almost anything that you're getting ready to write, whether it's fiction or nonfiction, you could actually first frame what you're getting ready to write, the opinion that you have about it or whatever, in the context of a story. Now, if it's fiction, what's cool is that you get to make it up. I mean, in a sense, you get to actually come up with a cool scenario that people could relate to, right? That could actually map to the reality of whatever the lesson is that you want to teach. If it's nonfiction, then it's kind of like a fun exercise. It's like, okay, I want to teach this concept of blank, be it investment or something in marketing, or just, some aspect of business, whatever it is that you want to teach people. If you could think of a parable, a real life parable that you can tell in an intentional way to make the point, that draws people into the story a lot more than just repeating facts. So it's definitely a flexible medium that's really powerful for today, for sure.
Absolutely. Yeah, great. So we talked a little bit about how it might apply to today's life and some relatable things on it, but specifically talking about the parables, I will be talking to about the Bible, Steve. What are some general points, or some just an overview of the topic of the biblical version of the parables that we'll be speaking about?
Yeah. So there are a number of parables in the Bible, primarily when we're thinking of parables, although you do see a few in the Old Testament. There's only a handful. And whereas for Jesus, it was like a central element of his teaching was being able to tell stories in parables. Now you might ask, well, I've never seen a parable in the Old Testament. Like, what's an example of that? Well, I'll just give you one. One example of a parable in the Old Testament is after David commits this horrible sin of adultery and murder in his arrangement with Bathsheba, the prophet at the time, which was Nathan, comes to David and tells this story, this parable of this fictional scenario that sort of mirrors what happened in David's life. But again, because he was sort of removed from the context, like he was looking at it as someone else's problem, David was getting mad. And he's like, whoever this guy is, I'm going to strip him of all his titles. He's going to repay back what he took fourfold, this, that, and the other thing. He was getting mad. And then Nathan, the prophet, looks at David and says, "Thou art the man." And it's like this It's like this total mic drop moment where David, in that moment, realizes that he majorly screwed up. And not only that, but he was being judgmental of somebody else who made a similar mistake. And so that's actually one of the most interesting. I never thought about this before, but it's really one of the most interesting examples of how directly applicable parables are to our situation. Like in that case, it was able to be immediately applied to that situation. It was really powerful. But Jesus utilized parables as a central part of his message. And a lot of them do have to do, they lived in an agrarian culture. Okay. And so basically what that means is their life was centered around agriculture. Like literally their time and everything was like, they thought about their time in terms of when the day began and when the day ended. And then they organized their year around times for sowing and then the time for reaping, which is harvest. And so everything they did was in this sort of agrarian culture, this agrarian economy. And so many of Jesus's parables focus on that. For example, there's one called the parable of the wheat and the weeds. There's one called the parable of the sower, one called the parable of the mustard seed. And these are some of the different ones we're going to talk about, but you can see sort of the agrarian themes in there. Another aspect of many of Jesus's parables is the Jewish context that we find the New Testament writers in. This is one of my pet peeves from a biblical perspective is people really try to disconnect. And when I say people, I mean like from atheists to megachurch pastors. Okay, so there's a wide spectrum of people who often try to disassociate the New Testament from the Old Testament for various reasons. And you can't do that. The New Testament is overtly a Jewish document. We often think of it not that way because it's in the New Testament that we learn that the Gentiles have been invited in to take part in God's blessing and God's salvation and to come under the rule and authority and dominion of God again after being disinherited thousands of years ago at the Tower of Babel. And so what we find is that whereas we typically think about them or the New Testament as being Gentile focused, Jesus's ministry was to the Jew first and then to the Gentile. The Gospels are just rife with Jewish themes. Jesus is preaching and teaching. Jesus was a rabbi, for heaven's sake. Okay. And then it'd be tempting to think, oh, well, when we get into Paul, we get into Paul's writing. Those are very anti-Jewish or whatever, but they're not. Paul was a Jew trained under Gamaliel, who was one of the premier Jewish scholars of the day. In fact, he was what they call a rabbin. He had a special title. He was very well respected. And Paul knew the law. Paul spent much ink talking about in the early church, working out the relationship between the law and what it looks like to follow Jesus. And so I say all that to say that many of the themes of the parables are not only agrarian in nature, but they're also very Jewish in nature. And they tackle ideas of religion. They get into ideas of fatherhood and what that means. They get into the idea of investment. And if you know anything about Jewish economy, like money and investment and good stewardship were a big piece of what they believed in. And so the parables are inextricably linked to a lot of these different concepts, and they're very diverse. And I'm, as you can tell, very excited to talk about them.
Yeah. And I mean, you touched on a lot there, but that kind of goes into, so Steve and I have a process of how we rate our movies by the meter. And if you haven't seen that episode, go check it out. It's a hoot and a holler. But we kind of broke down. We're not going to rate Jesus's parables on a meat scale. That just seems a little bit wrong. But as we analyze each of the parables that we go through, we are going to look at a few different areas that we're going to focus on. The first one being what you kind of touched on a little bit is the context of it. So you described, which is very helpful, kind of what the culture was like then. The civilization was like a lot of farming and agriculture, also obviously very Jewish, written by Jewish writers. And so that obviously is a lot of context going into it. But then when we dig down into each specific parable, whatever is relevant to the context of whether it was who Jesus was speaking to at the time, what might have been happening around him, and then just the parable itself, we'll be digging into. So that's just one aspect of a couple more that we'll be looking at as well.
Yeah, 100%. So let's talk through, and we'll actually come back to that here in just a minute and talk through because we actually have 3 different sort of themes that we're going to evaluate them by. I thought briefly we would just kind of run through the actual ones that we're going to talk about, so you guys would sort of know what we were going to look or what to be looking forward to as we go through the next few weeks. And we haven't actually decided if we're going to do like 1 episode per parable or 2 parables per episode. We haven't decided that yet. So
one long epic 10-hour one with all 8.
Exactly. So how about this? We have some notes on the ones we're going to do. How about we just go back and forth? I'll let you start and just tell, just very, very briefly, start with that one. I'll go first because I didn't spoil it. I started to say it. I'll go first. We'll just go back and forth. First one we're going to do is the Good Samaritan. This is found in Luke chapter 10, verses 25 through 37. It is a fantastic story. It has to do a lot with the religious and cultural context of the day and talking about really who our neighbor is and who, what kind of people that we're supposed to love as followers of Jesus. And so I'm excited to talk about that one.
Yeah, that's a good one. I'm really excited about the second one. I feel like that, so the prodigal son, found in Luke 15, 11 through 32. I feel like that this one, kind of gets overlooked. It's almost like the common one that everyone knows. So I'm really excited to dig into it and, really look into its themes. It has themes of love, compassion, forgiveness, unconditional love. There's just a lot going into that. So I'm excited to explore that one.
Yeah, me too. And it's really interesting because there are multiple subjects of the prodigal son story. So anyway, so that's a little whet your appetite for that one. I'm excited about that. The next one is the parable of the mustard seed. That's Matthew 13, 31 and 32. A shorter one for sure. But it's got some very interesting themes. I don't want to give away too much here. But there's a question about because Jesus says this is the smallest of all the seeds, and we kind of know that it's not the smallest of all the seeds. So how do we? Bible contradiction. What do we do about that? So I'm excited to talk about that one.
Jesus must have lied, right?
He must have lied. He's a liar. He's not the God of the universe. He didn't even know that the mustard seed is not the smallest of all the seeds. Anyway,
the way you said that sounded like it would become straight out of the Monty Python movies. We didn't even know it was the smallest one.
Yeah. I'm excited about that one.
Next one we'll talk about after that is the parable of the talents. Again, another one that people are fairly familiar with. It's a teaching that can be both applied, I think, to money, being very wise with the money that you have, but also to the skills, the blessings that God has given you, time management. It really can be applied to everything. So that'll be another good one that we go through.
Yeah, I quite love that the King's English says talent there. And so that word has been popularized, but then in modern day, when we say the word talent, we mean something different, but it's so cool that you can actually apply the story to all of those meanings. And so I can't wait to talk about that. That'll be fun.
Absolutely.
So the next one we're going to cover is the parable of the wheat and the weeds. And I have to be honest, when I saw this one, when I was going through and I was looking at some of the different parables, I thought, man, you don't really think about this. This one doesn't seem to come up that much. But what's cool about it, and this is in Matthew 13, 24 to 30, this one is actually a really interesting teaching directly from the mouth of Jesus that addresses the problem of evil. And we talk about the problem of evil a lot in apologetic circles, and that is the defense of the truth of God's word, and really the defense of the Christian worldview. And there's a lot of opinions about the problem of evil, but you almost never hear people bring up where Jesus strictly addresses it. And so I'm excited to talk about that. I think it'll be really eye-opening for people, especially if they're not familiar with this one, because it's one of the lesser known parables for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And we were both kind of stopped in our tracks trying to think about what that was, what that one was.
Yeah. Yep.
And the next one after that, so it would be the parable of the sower, found in Mark 4, 1 through 20. It's actually one of the longer ones by verse. It's a really good one. It's it'll be fun to dive into again, all the context of it and the other themes that we're going to explore, because I feel like a lot of times this one turns into your typical Sunday morning sermon, if that makes sense. And so I'm sure a little bit of that will come up while we're talking about, but it'll be good to kind of analyze it from a story perspective and look at it for the parable that it is. So I'm excited for that.
Yeah, it'll be good. It's another one where there's actually some controversy around how to interpret it. There's a lot of people who are, just a lot of disagreement on how to interpret it. A lot of disagreement about what it, or maybe not disagreement, but misconception about what it means. So it's another really good one.
Awesome.
Yep. So, the unmerciful servant. This is another one that actually does not come up very often. And I actually, my pastor preached on this. Oh man, I don't know. It's been a few months now, but he preached on it, and I was like, man, I forgot about that. It's so good. It's a really good one, and basically just gets into the concept of how we're often so willing to we so very much desire forgiveness and mercy from other people, but we're so slow to dole it out to other people. And so again, I hope you see that all of these are very, very important lessons that will have something for us in the, like today. It's not just a Bible story, right? It's a very important lesson. And by the way, this one is in Matthew 18, 21 through 35. So the unmerciful servant, it should be a good one.
Excellent. And the final one, the eighth one that we'll be covering is another one that's up for debate and arguments and fighting and wailing and gnashing of teeth.
Nice. See what you did there.
Yes, I did. Yeah, the rich man and Lazarus that I found Luke 16:19 through 31. That's going to be a fun one. I think it's a great one to kind of end the series on too, to dig into that.
Yeah, I can't agree more. You'll just have to wait and see what all the controversy and all the fuss is about. You wouldn't think these simple stories told to a agrarian culture would have so much controversy and so much like hoopla about them, but they really do. And and none of it is trivial. It's all very important. And worth discussing. So that should be really cool. So okay, let's talk about how we're going to actually go through these. You already mentioned about the historical context piece of it, and I spent no little time going through how we were going to approach that. Why don't you tell us about the other lenses through which we're going to actually explore these parables?
Yeah, so we've touched on the historical context, and then really the next two categories are the spiritual and the actual spiritual moral teachings that Jesus was trying to communicate to those he was speaking to. And of course, whoever the writer was of the book, including that and what the spiritual lesson is. And then the third one is shying away a little bit from the specific spiritual lesson and just what we can get out of it universally. So if you're not a Christian even, how can you apply maybe that story or the lesson that's taught to your everyday life or or with your family or something that maybe you can help yourself internally? So we're going to look at the context of it. We're going to look at the actual spiritual teaching that Jesus was trying to, or that he did communicate. And then just the general, how we can apply it to our lives today.
Yep. And I can't wait for that because one of the most interesting things, the more I read the Bible, and I say this having been a Christian for a very long time now, the more I read the Bible, like the less need I actually find for other self-help books and all of that, because it's like, if you would just do what the Bible says, even if you don't want to be a Christian, like I hate to say that because I want you to be a Christian. If you're not following Jesus, then you need to be following Jesus. But like, even if you approach it from a purely pragmatic standpoint, you'll be doing life better than the tens of thousands of people who just ignore the Bible and treat it as thousands of year old ancient gobbledygook. It's very much not that. All of your favorite self-help and personal development authors took their ideas from the Bible. Sorry, they just did. So I think these parables are a obvious place where many of those themes come out. And because I do actually love self-help and personal development, I'm really excited to talk through how these themes sort of underlie all of that. So it's going to be good.
That's another topic all on its own. It's just the valuable life lessons through the Bible, just simple stuff without even looking at the quote unquote Christian side of things. Anyway, good stuff. So Steve, what what's the goal of this series? What do we want for you and I? What do we want for people listening to this? What's kind of the ultimate purpose of going through this series?
Yeah. Well, I feel like the Christian and gospel-y answer would be to introduce people to Jesus. And in a way that is friendly and approaching, and it deals a lot with what he actually says. Instead of just people's opinions about him. It's like, how did Jesus actually think the world worked? And also just because, this is a very unique podcast, which if you listen to, you already know that. It's kind of like, where is the intersection in storytelling and even business and the biblical worldview? Like, there's actually a lot, like we were just saying, that the Bible speaks to that you wouldn't think about. Like, you can really learn a lot about how to be wealthy, how to be wise, how to have a great marriage. You can learn a lot of practical benefits, even if you're not a Christian, from engaging with the Bible. And so that's one of the big things that I really hope that you'll gain from this. And then also, we're just kind of like, me and Alex are both Christians, and we find that this is the way to live, and this is the way to life. And it's not only the way to do life, it is the way to have life. And so we would be remiss not to start focusing a little bit more of our content around that, because it's such a unifying point. Like, the Bible, it acts sort of like this glue that holds all these other ideas that we like to talk about together. And I think parables are just a really great illustration, ironically, of the glue of just living well, following Jesus, telling great stories, being successful in your endeavors in life and business. The parables talk about all of those things and hold them together in a really unique way. So I'm pretty pumped about it.
I think you said it good just about us. Being a Christian is not something that Steve and I do. It's something that is, like, it is life itself. And so being able to explore the parables, and Steve and I have, Lord willing, quite a few years left ahead of us. We just find the stories in the Bible so interesting and exciting. And it's it just speaks a lot of truth and is alive for us. And so it'll be fun to really be able to talk about these and dig into other subjects as we keep going on, while also mixing in our marketing and our fictional and our fun movie time. So I'm really excited about this series. I think it'll be good.
Yeah, I mean, to me, reading the Bible, and I didn't always approach it this way. In fact, I actually wrote a book called "The Bible Isn't Boring," because
trying to convince yourself.
Well, no, I mean, just, it's so easy to fall into the trap of thinking that the Bible is boring. But the Bible is like a mix of reading the best personal development, the best self-help, the best fantasy novels, the best science fiction, utopia, like all of that. The Bible is like, if you just read it, it's the best of all of those things in one book that just so happens to hold, in my view, the key to life also. And so it's like, it's just an amazing book that you should all start engaging with. And I hope parables are going to be sort of a nice little entry point into, like, starting to see that and appreciate the Bible for what it is. So I'm excited about that.
And interesting too, I think it's helpful for Christians too, like what you said, who find the Bible, sad to say, but just kind of like stagnant at times. It's hard to get into, but also for non-Christians, like, there are secular colleges out there that have courses examining the Bible from like a fictional lens. Now, like we used to, obviously we see it as the full truth, but at the same time though, that's how much story is in the Bible and how exciting it is. There are actually courses out there that view it as a storytelling book, which is exactly what it is.
Well, look at somebody like Jordan Peterson. Now, Jordan Peterson is just a really interesting cookie, right? Because at this point, his daughter has actually bridged the gap to belief in God. And ironic that Jordan is adamant that the Bible is pretty much the most important work of literature ever written. He is adamant about the fact that you can't even understand modern contemporary culture without understanding the Bible.
He's more passionate about the Bible than a lot of Christians are.
And I think Now, I don't want to speak for Jordan Peterson, although our current 31 subscribers on YouTube do not even compare to his gazillions, and so I don't think we're in danger of putting words in his mouth and getting in trouble here. But
unless Jordan Peterson is one of our 31 subscribers,
unless he is, in which case, Jordan, hi, that's amazing. But I think it would be fair to say that that Jordan would advise structuring your life around what the Bible says to do. In other words, I think he's just about as accepting of the biblical stories as a true way of living. He actually, like, I remember a particular interview or video of him literally like crying, thinking about the possibility that it's so extraordinary that he doesn't know what someone would do if they were to actually believe it. Yeah. And so he so deeply believes in living that way that he's almost overwhelmed at the thought of being a Christian and actually accepting that it's not only the way to live, but that Jesus is true and that he is truth and that he is the way. And so it's really interesting to see someone sort of teeter on that line between accepting that Jesus is who he is, versus, not actually accepting that truth, but living as though it is true. So really fascinating.
Very
stuff,
interesting.
Man.
Yeah. He's a good one to listen to just to get that perspective.
Yep. And I'm not going to agree with everything he says about it, but it's really interesting how much more seriously he takes it than a lot of people do. So this is not a Jordan Peterson episode, but if you want to look at somebody who accepts the Bible for what it is and takes it seriously, even who doesn't bridge all the way into the religious side of things, it's he's a good one to follow and to check out. So
excellent. Before we get into our story of the week, if you're new to this, we always provide our little story of the week where we deviate from the path and just have fun with it. Just a reminder, we would love to answer questions that anyone has. So if you have a question about a particular parable that you're going through, or if you want to see a certain topic come up, or just a personal question for me and Steve, put it in the comments. Let us know. Feel free to give in your input. We're always looking at any comments that you have. So definitely do that.
100%. Yeah, we would love some engagement. Believe it or not, comments on our YouTube channel. And I know a lot of you listen on audio, but the comments on our YouTube channel, that's a great way to show YouTube that you love this content and that you would like for more people to see it. I'm encouraged, Alex, because in recent days, we've got a little influx of subscribers and some comments on videos and stuff. And I think what we're finding is that the more that we find our audience, once we actually get in front of the right people, they're really glad they found
absolutely.
us. So it just takes a minute to sort of find the people who are interested in the sort of connections that we're making. But hey, once we find them, it's like they're really enjoying it. So if that's you, if you're listening to this, please share with others and help us find more of our people.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, if you made it this far, you probably are Steve and Alex. You are us and we are you. And so if you have made it this far,
that's scary.
Get your friends involved. You just share the podcast, talk about it, because we're all in it together. And anyway.
Amen. Yeah.
All right, Steve.
Absolutely.
Story of the week. You go first.
Story of the week. I'll go first. Okay. So, I'm super pumped. I have pre-ordered it. I almost never pre-order books, but I have pre-ordered the biography of Elon Musk that has been written by Walter Isaacson. Now, do you know who Walter Isaacson is?
I don't think so, no.
Wow. Okay. So
it doesn't ring a bell, at least.
So he's a tech guy, but also one of the premier biographers of our day. He's written a biography on Steve Jobs. That's probably what he's most famous for. He's written a biography on Ben Franklin. He's written one on Leonardo da Vinci.
Yeah, so I've read a couple of his books. Name escaped me.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah. So I listened today. It's on YouTube. There's a video, which it's just the audio, but it's on YouTube, of a Twitter Spaces that Isaacson was on with some people discussing this book. And boy, was it fascinating. It was so good. I immediately went and pre-ordered it. I'm so excited. He got to spend. I was kind of catching bits and pieces. But I could be wrong about this. Don't hold me to this. But I want to say that he spent the better part of the last 3 years essentially following Elon Musk around in his daily life with like unprecedented access.
That's cool.
Like it was that crazy of a project. Like he was talking through all of the stuff about the Twitter acquisition and everything. He was there for all of that and well beyond that, and really got to interact with what it's like to be this person, to be Elon Musk. And it was so fascinating because he even was quick to say, like, yeah, there's like going to be political disagreements and everything that I have. But he was so enthralled with this man who became the subject of his biography that all of that stuff, I want to say, just took a total backseat. Any of the political stuff took a backseat. It was just like, imagine a man who was so truly motivated by his mission. Like one of the coolest little nuggets that I got was that the mission, because we talk about this in marketing, like in marketing and modern business literature, there's a lot of talk about being mission minded and being purpose driven and all of that stuff. But Walter said that for Elon, it's like the money, the economics, like none of that was the primary driver. In fact, it wasn't even a consideration as to like how things were going to happen. In other words, Elon says, okay, in order for humanity to survive, we have to become multiplanetary. Okay, now what does that mean? And then you start doing that. So that's the mission. That's the mission. How do we get multiplanetary? And not only is he apparently, and all this is in the book, and I'm so excited, not only is he apparently able to like literally think that many steps ahead, like thinking about Tesla and creating electric cars. It's not just, oh, where's the electric car? It's, I need to be thinking about how to build the system to mass produce the thing that's going to be big in 6 or 7 years. And then along the way, and this was the cool insight, along the way, the monetization piece of it falls into place. And so he figures out a way to get the money for the mission after he's already started putting the pieces together to make the mission work. Like Starlink, just getting with a goal of getting like 5% of global internet market share with a satellite internet service, and then being able to do that literally was just a byproduct of this idea about going to Mars and making humanity multiplanetary. Not to mention the contracts that he's got with NASA to and the International Space Station and all of that stuff. It's like the monetization came along the way in the pursuit of the mission. It wasn't like the primary driver or even a consideration until the mission had gotten moving, which I appreciate. The reason I appreciate that is because I am a ready, fire, aim kind of guy. And so I love having an idea, executing on it, and then iterating and figuring things out. And so it's kind of nice to hear that literally the richest and arguably most important figure on planet Earth is also that way. So that just kind of gives me a little bit of validation. So
I always thought you looked a little like Elon too. So,
I mean, who knows? Maybe I'm next. Maybe I'm next.
Strikingly AI this about you. It must be.
Yeah. Must be that. So, yep. All right, Alex.
Excellent. So I'm not going to pretend I know everything that's going on in
That's okay.
In
Nobody
Russia.
does.
Nobody does. But I know some, and I think I possibly know enough. But so the Wagner Group, have you read up on this or heard about the recent things about it? So it's just just what an interesting thing that's happening in Russia, where they, if my understanding is correct, the Wagner Group basically worked for Russia since 2013 or 14. And then all of a sudden, there was just a revolt and they just turned on Russia. And apparently the news that I heard recently now is that for whatever reason, Putin has dropped, I don't know how he worded it, but dropped the charges against the Wagner Group or something and is trying to maintain peace. I think Putin is in a little bit of, I wouldn't necessarily say panic mode, but I think the reality of just the whole situation is settling in on him, knowing that it's going to come to a headway at some point. It's a little, I wouldn't say I'm scared about it. I use the term lightly, but it's kind of scary too, thinking of how this all will end. A lot of people are saying that the worst outcome is that Russia actually like loses or is embarrassed for either Putin and his end of life, what else he might try to do, or for the next guy to take over him. Or if Putin dies, what type of uprising is going to happen there? Who else is going to be, who's going to be behind the nuclear button at that point? So just a lot of interesting stuff going on. Again, it doesn't scare me. Everything's in God's hands and everything will all work itself out. But I just find it very interesting, all the stuff that's going on there. And I don't know when it's going to resolve itself. I don't know if it'll be in a year or in 5 years, but at some point, this whole conflict, for the most part, is going to come to an end, and it'll just be, I have no idea where it's going to end up.
Yeah. Well, what's so interesting is like, it's not as though like, let's say that this guy's revolt had worked, the Wagner Group. That it wouldn't necessarily be a good thing for these guys to be in charge of Russia because for all intents and purposes, they're just as bad, if you will.
I mean, my understanding is that, I don't know about now, but at least it used to be, I think the Wagner Group's mercenaries are like criminals, I want to say. Like given, I don't know if you want to call it a second chance or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah. No, but I found it funny because yesterday at lunch, I was like, I normally watch YouTube at lunch because I just try to wind down. And sometimes it's a business thing, but sometimes it's not. And so Ben Shapiro was on it. I was so intrigued by the thumbnail and the title because it's exactly how I felt. And it was something to the effect of nobody knows what the heck is going on in Russia. And so he opens it up like that, Ben Shapiro, he's kind of funny about stuff anyway. He's like, okay, so here's the deal. Nobody has any clue what's going on in Russia. Like, it was just really funny because I know it's how everybody feels.
Saying that. Absolutely.
So
have you ever
it's hilarious.
Have you seen the Daily Wire video? Purely for fun. No knowledge gained from this YouTube video, but I think it was a year or so ago, maybe, where they did the escape room based off of the movie. I haven't watched the movie, but so it's Matt Walsh. What's his name? Is it
Clavin?
Clavin, yeah.
Clavin, Andrew Clavin.
So Walsh and Clavin go into this escape room together and do it, and Michael Knowles and Ben Shapiro go in the same escape room and they see who's faster with it, and it's just like 20 to 30 minutes of just straight up laughing. It's just so funny the whole time. It's well worth it.
I gotta check that out. I gotta check that out.
I put it on my watch later for several months, and finally I got to it. I'm glad I did. It was good.
I think not to make this about the Daily Wire, but I think they actually did a Twitter video tonight. They did one of their Daily Wire backstage things, and they did this one on Twitter. And I think, I'll have to find where it is, but I am pretty sure that, there it is, backstage. Yep, they're discussing all of the most recent stuff, like the Russian coup, the Hunter Biden stuff. It's an hour and 15 minutes, and it's right there on Twitter. Wow. So anyway, I'm going to watch that later. I'm pumped about it. So,
have you ever seen Matt Walsh smile?
Never.
I don't think he's ever smiled.
I don't think
I've seen him in like little behind the scene clips with him and his family elsewhere. And
yeah, that's probably it.
You just never see him smile.
I wouldn't smile if I had to cover the stuff that he does on a regular basis. Boy.
You know what?
Anyway,
I can't imagine being stuck in that world. Either the world of where you just your life revolves around the news cycle, or if you're in the political structure. Even if you're not a politician, if you are, working in the government, helping politicians or this or that, that would be I'm sorry if I offended anyone out there. It would just be rough for me. That'd be rough for me.
No, it's true. No, it's true. And I actually admire him quite a bit. If you see any of his live talks or anything like that, like a lot of times he'll end them with like a plea. And again, without getting overly, political about things here, it's like he actually demonstrates, even though I've never seen him smile, he actually demonstrates a true compassion for people as a result of his worldview.
Yeah.
That, I'll just say it. It's, you can tell the companies who actually care about people versus they take the month of June as Pride Month as an opportunity for marketing. Because August 1st, or July 1st rather, all that stuff comes down.
Yeah.
It's back to business as usual. And you can tell, you can tell when the stuff is real and genuine, when there's real and genuine care, or when there's marketability and profit at the core of it. And anyway, I do want to appreciate and sort of give an apologetic, if you will, for Matt Walsh. I think he's a lot more of a compassionate and caring person than most people give him credit for. And I think you'd almost have to be to deal with some of what he has to deal with. The death threats, the threats on his family, the doxing, oh my gosh, you just hate me, when he knows that that's not true. Yeah. And so I don't want to say that he's like a martyr. I mean, who knows? For all intents and purposes, he could be doing it for for public recognition, which I highly doubt. I don't get that sense, but it's just interesting. I really think he's a caring person, and so even though he may be a little brash, I think it's part of the personality. I think it's part of the brand. But at the end of the day, he cares, and I think a lot of these people, these political commentators, care. And you wouldn't normally think about them that way, but they're very caring people, and they have real feelings, and they don't do what they do for fame and fortune. I think they do what they do because they really care about people, and that sets them apart. So,
well said, Steve.
All right, my friend, this has been a good one. I'm excited to dig into some more parables, and let's dive in. This should be a fun series.
Absolutely, always nice. Always good talking to you, Steve.
Later, my friend.